At this time, we're going to bring on our guest of Sports 360 AZ, Jordan Spurgeon. Jordan, how's it going?
It's going great. How you guys doing? You're sounding great. Contact's looking good, so glad to be here.
Appreciate it. I know you've been really busy the last few days. You've been doing a lot of stuff. I saw you were on the sideline interviewing somebody from a high school football team. Can you tell us a little bit as to what you've been up to lately?
Yeah, lately it's football is like all that's on my mind. Like 95% of my football, the other 5% is like, what am I going to eat today or when am I going to sleep kind of thing. So yeah, out on the sidelines, I started hosting a new high school football show at Sports 360 AZ, talking about different things going on, interviewing coaches, doing some social media stuff, and then just going out to games, telling stories here and there. So rivalry game where one of the rivals had never won ever. So I don't know how it was called a rivalry. And then they finally won, so it was pretty exciting. Then the next day, flew to Las Vegas to cover the University of Arizona versus BYU. Brand new Allegiant Stadium. If you guys ever have the chance to go out there to watch the Raiders play there or whoever play there, it's freaking beautiful. That's probably – I haven't been to Dallas yet to see the Cowboys game. It might be better than what the Cowboys have going on there. It might be better than Jerry World, which I didn't think was possible, but it's a freaking beautiful stadium, and that was like really amazing.
Wow. So – Raiders, wow, that's interesting because I remember the Raiders were playing on an old baseball field. So
yeah,
like that's such an upgrade for them. I mean, I'm happy for them too, but obviously you have been analyzing the Arizona Cardinals for a little bit now, and I believe you're working for them this year, correct? You've been doing some work for them?
Yeah, at Sports 360 AZ, we just kind of cover them here and there. So I've been going out to practices when I have the opportunity, just doing the pressers and kind of observing things and taking notes and writing the occasional column on them. So, yeah, we're going all in on the Cardinals, and we'll see what they bring this year.
And that leads me to my first question. Last year, you guys finished in the middle of the pack, third in the NFC West, and I kind of want to get your thoughts on the man under center, the guy that everybody's looking at, including myself, because I happen to like him a lot, quarterback Kyler Murray entering year number 3. What are your expectations for him heading into this very pivotal year? Because our quarterback is heading into a very similar situation up in New York.
Yeah, with Kyler Murray, this is sort of the make or break year. He made really good strides from his rookie year to his sophomore campaign. Last year, I believe, preseason, I picked him to win MVP. Like, I thought he was going to take an even bigger step forward. It didn't quite happen. But I think he's ready to take that step. The only concern I have with Kyler, and it's mostly just from being around the team and saying things, and it could be a lot of speculation because there's just speculation with a lot of teams. A lot of people are saying he's not super passionate about football the way he was baseball. And I think at the time, everyone's like, he must be passionate about football if he chose to give back the money to the A's when he was drafted in the first round by the A's and then decided to play football. But I think in his mind it was, crap, I just won the Heisman. I'm going to be the number 1 overall pick. How do I turn that down? And I'm not saying that's true. That's a lot of speculation. But if that is true, this Cardinals team's in a lot of trouble because that means he's not putting in the work to make that development. But it'll be interesting. I think he has, but there are still some concerns. Preseason football doesn't mean a whole lot in my eyes, but your perception about preseason football matters. Look at Patrick Mahomes talking on the sidelines, and maybe he's just saying the right things. Hey, I look forward to being out here and getting work done and kind of getting my timing down with my receivers. And Kyler Murray was like, yeah, I don't really want to play in these games. I'm good. I don't really need to. And then first time goes out, offense in 2 series, pick up 1 total yard. So it's a little bit concerning for me with Kyler Murray. The talent's there. The ability is there. Does he really want it? Has he been getting after it? I'm not 100% sure. That's the only question. If he wants it, they're going to be just –
yeah, I mean, last year, 26 touchdowns, 11 rushing, and he has a backfield that features the likes of Fordham product Chase Edmonds right up the road from where I am. And this is a guy who's entering his 4th year, a guy who's been relatively quiet his first 3 seasons. Now, I know the Cardinals brought in James Conner. What is the running back situation like right now? Because I feel like it kind of impacts Murray a bit as well as far as what he's able to do based off the running game for this team.
Yeah, this is really the difference for the team this year. Cliff Kingsbury said he doesn't want Kyler running around as much as he has. He knows he will because that's part of his instincts. And so that's all going to depend on Chase Edmonds and what he does. I think everyone realizes what James Conner brings to the table. I don't see any sort of bounce back scenario where it's like he was the first couple years there in Pittsburgh, back during the Le'Veon Bell era when they had to get rid of him and James Conner kind of took the role. So I think Chase Edmonds has the opportunity to basically steal 70% of the carries. Like, I think that potential is right there. And I think he's ready for that. His body looks like it's in better shape. He's been injury prone, though, the last couple of years. That's why he's never really taken over that load. And then they had Kenyon Drake in there in the backfield with him, who kind of was the power back. Now James Conner fills that role. But I think what all indications are, based on what I've seen in practice and what they're saying, Edmonds is going to get about 70% of the carries. Is he going to score a lot of touchdowns? I think Kyler Murray steals a lot of those. I think James Conner steals some of those in the red zone. But I still think as the guy getting most of the carries on first, second, and third down in many situations, I think he's going to do just fine and put up close to 1,000-yard season as long as he stays healthy, which is really the caveat with like any running back. But for him, especially when he hasn't put a full season together, I think it's very possible if he does so this year.
Yeah, I think it's going to be interesting to see if there's any breakout player in that backfield for Arizona. I think that could potentially make or break their offense a little bit. James and I, when we're formulating these questions, we know the Cardinals' biggest strength is DeAndre Hopkins, at least on the offense. He's their best individual offensive player. James, I know, yeah, there it is. Well, there's the question. What does he do to this offense that's been missing in years past?
Yeah, he opens everything up. This is the guy that plays a big role in Kyler Murray potentially taking that next step into one of those top 2 tiers of quarterbacks. It's because of a weapon like DeAndre Hopkins. He did it last year as just sort of the main guy himself with no other help around him. He was able to still put up a phenomenal season, and there's no reason to expect anything less this year. His ability to just make plays in any situation, double coverage, single coverage, zone, man, doesn't matter. In my opinion, he's the best receiver in football. I think Devontae Adams is the better route runner, but DeAndre Hopkins overall is a better receiver than Devontae Adams, in my opinion. And so when you have the best receiver in football, that's impactful. To me, receivers are icing on cake. You need the solid foundation in the cake. That's your quarterback, your offensive line, your running game. But when you have that icing, it just makes the cake so much better. So if you have a chocolate cake and the icing's okay and it gives you a stomach ache, you don't really have it. But when that icing is like really soothing and it kind of puts you to sleep after and you got that kind of warm feeling, you're feeling like you're in a good spot. And that's what DeAndre Hopkins is. He just makes the Cardinals offense feel like they're in a good spot.
You want me – now I want cake. All right, I'll see you guys later.
I just had some before I came on, so that's why that totally popped in my mind. Like, I had some leftover. I was like, you know what? I'm going to eat this, and then that just came to my mind. So, yeah.
That's awesome. You know, it's crazy because where we are in New York, or at least my town, I kind of told James about this, the hierarchy of fan bases, it's Giants, Packers, and then Jets, which is surprising because the Packers travel very well. So, I always hear a lot about Devontae Adams, how he's the number 1 receiver in the league. And, you know, I keep trying to deflect that argument a little bit, but it's not that they're standoffish when I try to bring that up, because I do agree with you. I think Hopkins is the most talented. Adams has the better numbers because of who he has playing quarterback. And basically that DeAndre Hopkins, in my opinion, inside the 20s, I mean, that's probably the one point of his game where they don't maybe target him as much because he only had 6 touchdowns last year, so I'm just hoping they get him more involved because we mentioned the 11 rushing touchdowns from Kyler Murray. That takes reps from Hopkins, is where Adams is getting a lot of those reps where, you know, he kind of breaks off for a lot of big plays. But I also think the addition of A.J. Green will help the case of DeAndre Hopkins, where it might take some attention off of him.
I agree 100%. When they first signed AJ Green, I kind of wrote it off as, you know, it's nice. Maybe Larry comes back and he's just another weapon to have on that team, because a lot of the young guys they've drafted just have not panned out so far. They've been really bad at drafting wide receivers. Rondale Moore this year could be the one to change that. We'll wait and see on him. But AJ Green, watching him at practice and everything he says, he's healthy for the first time in like 3 years. Like, he's healthy. He's changed the way he's prepped his body. His workouts are different. His diet is different. And I think that's going to pay dividends for himself and for this Cardinals team. I really think this is a guy that, as a wide receiver too, taking a little bit of pressure off DeAndre Hopkins, is really going to fit in nicely with this offense and take them to another level. Because the only thing with this team that I know for certain is they're going to score points, and they're going to score points at a high level. I think AJ Green elevates them to a team that, yeah, they're going to score points, to a team like, okay, this offense is going to be hard to stop, meaning every week you're going to see 24-plus points from them. You're going to see 30 points most weeks from this team. And I think he's a big reason why, because he's healthy, and I think he's just changed the way he's playing football. And I think that's going to be a huge thing. And, you know, most guys, you play in a city like Cincinnati for a long time. Nothing against Cincinnati. A change of scenery helps. You went through quarterback issues there for a long time. Now you come in, you have a quarterback that's established through his first 2 seasons. You have another receiver on the other side that's established as a top 3 receiver in the game. I think AJ Green's liking what he sees here, and he wasn't just I'm going to go to the first team that offers me a contract. This is the place he wanted to be at, and there's a reason for that, and I think it's going to pay dividends for them.
Yeah. So, staying on that offensive side, what's your offensive line concerns for this year?
Yeah, this is still the biggest concern for me on the team. I think this is their weakest point. They've addressed it a lot. I think the left side is solid. Rodney Hudson, getting him from the Raiders, arguably a top 3 or 5 center in the league, brings a veteran presence, brings some leadership. You've got DJ Humphries at left tackle. He's been solid for multiple years. He's kind of been the guy taking the fall on a lot of offensive line Cardinals conversations over the last year, and he said he's kind of sick of the Cardinals offensive line being the reason and the blame for a lot of losses. And so I think he's really helping lead this group. I like Justin Pugh a lot at left guard. Right tackle, Kelvin Beacham's a guy that's up and coming. The right guard spot is a little bit of a question mark. You've had 2 guys out due to COVID the last couple of weeks. I like Josh Jones, their 3rd-round pick 2 years ago or last year. He really got a lot of reps and really impressed in preseason. So the talent is there individually on this line. I don't know where they are at cohesively. We saw some strides last year. They went from giving up, I think, 48 sacks Kyler's rookie season to 27 last year. I think that number is going to be around the same this year. Even with Rodney Hudson being there, I don't quite know how much better this offensive line is. They have a little more depth, but I'm still not sold, especially with some really tough pass rushers they're going to face this year. The 49ers front 7 is going to be a lot better. The Rams front 7 with Aaron Donald, that's a nightmare to mess with. Seattle's defensive front is better than it was last year. I don't know by how much, but it is still a pretty lethal front 7. So they're going to have their work cut out for them this year. It'll be interesting, but to me, that's the biggest question mark on offense for them is the offensive line.
Before James gets to his next question, I just want to make a statement on that too. I think your 2 best linemen are probably Hudson and Pugh, to say the least. And I remember that because Pugh was our 1st-round pick back in 2013. And I remember the Giants line was in a very similar situation as the Cardinals line. Well, it still kind of is, where Pugh and our center were the best 2 linemen, and Manning was just getting brought down pretty much every other play, whether he was getting hit, knocked down, pressured, or sacked. I think Murray, at least he's a little more mobile where he can work around that, but I still think the sack numbers are going to be relatively high, which is where I'm concerned with for this team, because offensive line is a really tough position to find because you need 5 of them, right? As we're at the guard position, you can kind of scoot by with being average. At the tackle position, you can't, right? So I think that's where the Cardinals kind of have shortcomings, and it could affect their playoff status again this year if they don't gel.
And in the passing game, too, what doesn't help them is Cliff's offense combined with Kyler Murray's ability to extend plays means they have to block for longer. Like, Kyler Murray is not a guy that's going to drop back 2-3 drops and make a play. He's not that quarterback. He's going to hold on to the ball. He's going to run around a little bit, and that's going to lead to more sacks. No matter how good or how bad your offensive line is, that's going to lead to more sacks. It's not even a knock on Kyler Murray. That's just how it works. And so there's a lot of pressure on them to still limit those, especially in games and against divisional foes where Kyler Murray is going to be looking for that big play. It's something he presses for sometimes, and it's going to be their job to give him that opportunity to make those plays and get the ball to Hopkins and AJ Green down the field. Because if they can do that, this offense is going to be a top 6-7 offense. I just don't know if they're there yet.
So from one side of the ball, we go to the other side of the ball. You guys acquire J.J. Watt. He prepares for his Cardinals debut. What are you expecting from him? How do you think he's going to react to now a completely new system?
Watt fits in. Like, he fits the culture of this team. He's changed the culture of this team. Watching him up close, the first practice I saw him, I was blown away because he was the most eager to learn things There's a lot of young guys on that defensive line. He was learning and soaking in as much as he could from the defensive line coaches and other guys on the team like Chandler Jones. He's a defensive player of the year 3 times over. He's an all-pro guy multiple times. And he's in here learning, not just the system, but different technique things on the defensive line. That's what's interesting about J.J. Watt. The health's a concern. That's just part of it. He's never really played full seasons, and when he has, he's been unstoppable. And I don't have high expectations for him on the field, but I do think what he does is he gives this defensive line, which was actually pretty good last year at spots, especially with guys like Chandler Jones. I think he gives them extra life in big moments, and that's going to be the difference for this team. They never had a guy opposite Chandler Jones that could make those plays in big moments. I felt like the defense last year was underrated, but at times in bigger moments they got exposed. And I think adding J.J. Watt just gives you that opportunity to make those plays when it matters most. And so that's really where he's going to make his difference. I don't see him being a guy with, 12 and a half sacks. I think it's closer in the 8 to 9 range, potentially, if he plays all 17 games. But I think those sacks are going to come in big moments. And that's what he brings to the table at this point in his career, and that's what he wants to do. And I just think that's where he stands right now. It's just, if he stays healthy, I think he'll be just fine.
Yeah, you bring up a really good point about his health, too. He is on the older side of his career right now, so it'll be interesting to see how he's able to play. I think playing on a line that has Chandler Jones, I know he's interchangeable. He can play the 3 tech, he can play the 5 tech as well. So I think that really helps Watt, get a little bit more one-on-one matchups against opposing offensive lines. But you mentioned Chandler Jones. I mean, you have Marcus Golden, Devon Kennard as a backup, but your 2 linebackers I really want to hone in on are Zaven Collins and Isaiah Simmons, 2 players, very young players who are both kind of, obviously Simmons didn't have the best rookie campaign, but Collins comes in high out of Tulsa. What are their strengths, and what have you seen so far, particularly in Simmons, that makes you think that he might have a better sophomore campaign?
Yeah, to backtrack a little bit too, to clear some things up for everybody too that maybe doesn't know, this situation is very interesting because you have another guy who's an all-pro linebacker in Jordan Hicks, and he was basically told on draft night, point blank, you will not have any opportunity to start on this team. It's Collins is going to play the mic, Simmons is going to play next to him. That's that. You can request a trade, you can do all that, find a place. He's still there. He's still there, and he's going to get a lot of reps because they've figured a way, I believe, to use Isaiah Simmons outside of just playing a traditional linebacker role, which is what we all expected beforehand. Last year, they didn't want that. Last year, they were very sold on having Simmons play mostly up the middle. That's what they wanted from him. They did not want him playing everywhere. And this year, I think they're more open to that because they still have a guy like Jordan Hicks there. So it'll be interesting. Zaven Collins, I think he's actually going to have a really good rookie campaign, different than Isaiah Simmons. His body is ready. It's been NFL ready for a while. His attitude is there. The ability to really, not as well as Isaiah Simmons, but the ability to be all over the field at any given point is also going to be a healthy role for Zaven Collins. Like, I believe you're going to see him mostly playing the mic spot early on, and I think eventually you're going to see him moving around a little bit more. I think they're going to realize, okay, this guy's going to go sideline to sideline with anybody, because he's that fast, he's that strong, he's that quick. So I expect him to have a pretty good rookie campaign. I think he's going to be good. By the way, too, we just had a documentary drop on him today. Our guy Jordan Hamm at Sports 360 AZ went to his hometown, Hominy, Oklahoma, small town, like a couple thousand people maybe, and just did a whole documentary on Zaven Collins. You guys check it out. Those of you watching, you can check it out. Just talks about him being a small town guy and kind of how he went to Tulsa with no other offers and plays with that chip on his shoulder. And I think that's going to be what comes to play here for the Cardinals. He still has that chip on his shoulder. He basically said at the draft, anyone that passed on me all these years, like, piss on you. That was his exact quote. That's like the best quote ever. Like, piss on you. That's where he's at mentally. So I think he's going to be ready. And to kind of sum that up, Simmons, expect a drastically better second season for him with a full season of OTAs, full season of training camp, preseason games. You're gonna be hearing Isaiah Simmons' name a lot this year. I think he's really gonna jump onto the scene as kind of the guy they expected him to be last year. I think the hesitancy they had with him last year is not there this year, and they don't have that same hesitancy with Zaven Collins like they did with Simmons. For whatever reason, no one here can quite figure out why they were so hesitant with Simmons. Maybe they just wanted to make sure they didn't expose him early on, but that hesitancy's gone, and it's basically non-existent with Collins. They handed him the starting job on draft night. He still had to work for it, but they handed him the starting job. That says a lot about how they feel about him.
Absolutely, and I definitely would love to check out that documentary on him, as he seems like, a good guy who's coming to the NFL trying to make a name for himself, who kind of took that tough path towards the league, which is always something that you love to see. And then hopefully Isaiah Simmons has a better season. I mean, looking back at it, I'm kind of happy we didn't take him 4th overall, but you never know how he could fit into a system. I'm sure Patrick Graham could have found a way for him. But moving on to your secondary, which is led by Pro Bowl safety Budda Baker. You do have 2 very young corners in Byron Murphy Jr. and Tay Gowan, who is a 6th-round draft pick out of UCF, who one of my buddies actually got to interview. Tay Gowan. Very, very nice guy. I really like him a lot. But are you concerned at all that opposing offense are going to pick on this secondary, in particular the 6th-round rookie?
We're going to find out early on, especially week 1 against the Titans. Tannehill's been an elite quarterback the last 2 years. They thought they kind of had the secondary figured out. And then Malcolm Butler retires. I know there's a lot going on with him. I don't think anyone blames him for retiring at this point. He's got some really serious issues he's dealing with, but that's going to hurt the secondary a lot. I mean, none of the cornerbacks, even the backups, are older than 24 years old. So it's a very young secondary. They're going to be targeted early on, and we'll see if they answer the call. My gut tells me it's going to be a rough first 8 or 9 weeks for this Cardinals secondary. I think they're going to get torched a lot, and they're going to be relying heavily on the defensive front to force pressure in order to relieve some of that pressure from the secondary. At the safety position, Budda Baker's going to do his thing. Behind him, you've got a couple guys, again, young and up and coming, but I think this is the part of the team where they're really going to be relying on J.J. Watt and Chandler Jones and the young linebackers and Collins and Simmons to kind of fill those gaps. And that's part of the reason why I believe you're going to see Simmons playing a more flex role and kind of going out in coverage a little bit more, because they're going to need to make up for some of that lost time, especially because, Tay Gowan didn't get a ton of those first team reps early on with Malcolm Butler being there. He never really missed practice until he had his issues just a week and a half ago. So it's going to be interesting. I think it's a rough stretch. I see the potential for development by the end of the year to where they get to a level where they're at least average. Like, I think they can finish the season at least average, but early on it's going to be a mess, and it's going to be a concern for the Cardinals early on.
So any surprise cuts with this team?
For the most part, it played out pretty well. I was a little bit surprised about Keyshawn Johnson, another wide receiver, kind of a failed experiment there. I get why they did it. They wanted to have a better mix of guys. Obviously you have Hopkins and Green there. Then you've got 2 kind of smaller speedsters and Andy Isabella and Rondale Moore. And, they're carrying 6 receivers now, so it doesn't surprise me that they had to cut receiver 7 and 8 there. And it just surprises me that Keyshawn Johnson wasn't in that 6 slot. But at the end of the day, he wouldn't have played much anyways. Outside of that, most of the other guys cut were pretty much on par. Johnson's a guy I could see being put on the practice squad, I think. I think there's an opportunity for him there to still develop, because knowing Steve Keim a little bit, I don't think he likes to just turn the page and give up on draft picks too early. I think he's a little bit stubborn in that area, which is fine. But it is a position they have not drafted very well at all. Honestly, they've actually been one of the worst drafting teams. So we're seeing a lot of those young guys that have failed already starting to not make cuts, and that's a little bit concerning. But when you add a bunch of veterans like they did this offseason, that's kind of to be expected.
That roster bubble is a really tough place to be, whether you're on the ins of that or the outs. Now, was there a player who made the 53-man roster that you kind of feel like is an under-the-radar type of guy that teams should keep an eye on this year, in particular teams in the NFC West?
Yeah, I think honestly at linebacker, Zeke Turner's a guy that kind of stood out. He's going to do a lot on special teams this year. He's kind of an ace. But I think, especially if anything were to happen to Simmons or Collins, I think he could have a decent amount of playing time, and he would still fit in pretty seamlessly. He's not nearly as talented as them or nearly as polished as them, but I think he's a guy that has an opportunity to make some plays this year. We're going to see it on special teams to get a taste of it, and we could see a little bit on defense this year in certain packages, and or if Collins or Simmons were to go down with any sort of injury anytime this year.
Awesome. Yeah, I'll definitely keep an eye out for him. Now, the NFC West, it's portrayed as the best division in football, right, because of how good it was. And I remember a decade ago how bad it was, right? 7-19 making the playoffs, the earthquake game with Marshawn Lynch where he had that insane run. Anyway, Do you agree with this statement? Do you think it is the best division in football? I mean, Matthew Stafford is a Ram. The 49ers secondary potentially just got better. They're getting healthier. And now, I mean, the Seahawks are still the Seahawks. I mean, I know that they've been wishy-washy the last year or two, but they're still a team that could potentially sneak into the playoffs. So where's your head at with this division?
Last year, I would have said best division hands down. Early in the offseason, I would have said that. There's a couple divisions I think could give it a run for its money. I think the AFC East is pretty strong. Even with the Jets being in there, I think they're pretty strong. But my gut still tells me the NFC West is the best division. I think you have two legit Super Bowl contenders with the Rams and the 49ers. The Rams are built to win now. There's a reason they, quote-unquote, gave up on Jared Goff to go get Matthew Stafford because their goals align. Jared Goff is still young and developing a little bit. Even though he's been to a Super Bowl, Matthew Stafford's kind of had his career accomplishments. Now he's waiting for that ring. So they're built to win now. That team top to bottom is a team that has almost, I don't want to say no future, but almost no future. They've got a window that they've extended by a couple of years by getting Stafford instead of Goff. So they're right there. The 49ers, last year they had the most injuries in football, it seemed like. They just had no chance. And now they've got two quarterbacks where Trey Lance is the future. Whether it's this year or next year, he's going to fit in just fine in Kyle Shanahan's offense. The potential's there. Jimmy Garoppolo, to me, is the better guy right now for this team. He's a guy that can get there to the Super Bowl. We've already seen it when he's played one healthy season. Only one season has he played all 16 games, and he made it to the Super Bowl. And now if he has a healthy roster around him, the receiving core shapes out, I think they have the potential to get back there again. And then Seattle, I heard you guys before kind of talking, maybe it's slowly going to be the end here. I've always felt that way about Seattle. They're a team I always kind of almost forget about. And then they win at least 9 games. Russell Wilson's never lost more than 7 games. He's always had at least 9 wins in his career in Seattle. So I can't even say they're not going to win 10, 11, 12 games this year because you never know with them. They could have holes everywhere, and Russell Wilson finds a way to hide them for some reason. So, and then the Cardinals, even if they finish the season, 8-9, 9-8, they're probably better than their record says because of how good the top of the division is. Same thing last year. They were better than their record said. And I know they started 6-3 and then kind of faltered at the end, but they were a little bit better than their record said. So I think this division might be the best division in football. I think I'm not going to go all in and say this is the best division in football, but I think it's at least right there. Like they have to be in the conversation.
Right. So I guess we're kind of putting all three of us on the spot here. And we'll start with you, Jordan. Who wins this division? Who do you think is the team that's going to come out on top of the NFC West and be that team that, potentially Super Bowl contender?
This is the hardest question because I could see any team winning it and I could see any team losing it, including the Cardinals. I think they're the most likely team to finish in 4th place, but I wouldn't be surprised if we looked up one day and they're 12-5 at the end of the year in 1st place. I think that potential's there. I'm not picking the Cardinals. I still think they are going to finish in 4th place. I think 8 to 9 wins is pretty much where they're going to finish. I think it's the Rams. I've never really been that high on the Rams, even in their Super Bowl year. But I think they're the best team in this division. I think Sean McVay is going to have a lot of fun with Matthew Stafford at quarterback. I think they've kind of addressed the offensive line that was slowly getting older and more injury prone. I think they've made a few adjustments this year that are going to help them out. You still have arguably a top 3 or 2 player in the NFL and Aaron Donald. Usually the players vote him number 1, which they never say who the players are that actually vote because a lot of players say, I never got to vote. I don't know who actually makes these lists. But Aaron Donald's that good that whoever's voting, they're pretty much right. He's a top 3 player, hands down. And the secondary is talented. I think this is the year the Rams put it together and go back to kind of what they did in 2017 when they were just that team. I think they're there. I think they're the team that's going to win this division. I think 12 games gets it done because while all teams are really good, you're just going to beat each other up in the division. If you go 3-3 in this division or, 4-2 in this division, you're winning the division, in my opinion, because there's no one going to go 6-0. There's no one that's going to go 5-1. If anyone goes 4-2, I'd be shocked. So long-winded, but I think the Rams are probably the team to beat in this division right now.
I like that. James, what do you think?
I would like to say San Francisco, but they've been up and down over the past few years, in my opinion. I would go with the Rams as well.
Yeah, as much of a vanilla pick as that might be because of all the hype around them this season, I do think they're going to come out on top. They've had the Seahawks number for years. You mentioned the Cardinals, how they're likely to finish in 4th. I do somewhat agree with that, although I do think if there's another team that could be, it could be Seattle. depending on if those holes are derailing this team where Russell Wilson just can't drag his feet anymore and uplift them to the playoffs. But yeah, I'm going to go with the Rams and then either the 49ers or the Seahawks finishing in second. How many wins do you think the Cardinals? You mentioned the 8 to 9 range. Do you think that's going to be where they fall, or?
Yeah, I'm thinking 8 to 9. Pressure's on. If that's the case and they don't have a winning record, I think Kingsbury and Keim are out. I think they have probably the shortest leash as a GM quarterback duo in the league this year. The Bidwells don't play around. They're very short-winded. Most coaches don't make it more than 3 or 4 years here. Ken Whisenhunt made it a little bit longer because, he had a little bit of success. But this team hasn't made the playoffs in 5 years. And if Kingsbury's offense looks a little bit dysfunctional again and not clutch at times, if the defense sort of falls apart, and some of those draft picks that haven't lived up to the expectations, if they don't, I think Keim and Kingsbury are out, and I think they finish at 8 wins. I don't see them being a team with a winning record this year. I think they're close, and it's in the realm of possibility, but I think there's still too many question marks, and they play a really tough schedule, so that doesn't help either.
Right. I'm with you on that. Now, our last question, James is going to pull it up now. Week 1, Cardinals at Titans. What's the key to beating Tennessee? Because obviously Derrick Henry is a monster, and you're going into Tennessee at a 1 o'clock start, which is never a good thing for a West Coast team, regardless of how good they are. So what's the key to beating Tennessee? They got better. They got Julio Jones in the offseason. Their defense is still very suspect, but what are your thoughts on this game?
Yeah, it's gonna have to be a shootout. I mean, you have to be able to put up 35+ points because you mentioned, Julio Jones in the mix there, AJ Brown. I mean, the 2 young corners are gonna have a time slowing that down. I know Julio Jones hasn't been himself maybe the last 2 years, but again, he's another guy that, like AJ Green, I'm not counting out to have a bounce back season and still be an elite receiver. Like, I think he's gonna fit in Tennessee fine. Same thing, change of scenery, different offense, different setup. So the key for them is literally going to be if you can top 35 points, because that Titans defense, I mean, anyone can score on them unless they've gotten better, which I don't know if they've added enough to get that much better this offseason. So that's going to be the key. You're going to need Kyler Murray to be dialed in. Like, he's going to have to be able to find DeAndre Hopkins, target him 10 to 12 times at least. And, if Hopkins comes away with 8 catches for 130 yards and a touchdown or 2, you'd have to be feeling pretty good as a Cardinals fan, as someone that, as a game they would be able to win. I don't think there's any stopping Derrick Henry, so I think it's just going to come down to, can the corners make enough plays? They're not going to make many plays, but can they make enough plays at the right times against Ryan Tannehill and Julio Jones and A.J. Brown and get those stops at the end of the game? Because regardless, I think Tennessee's going to drop 30 on them. And I think the Cardinals have the potential to drop 30 as well. So it's going to be interesting, but the young secondary, they're going to have to be the ones that step up for the Cardinals if they're going to win.
James?
I think it's going to be good. Personally, looking forward to it. Maybe there'll be an upset. Titans, again, like you said, Jordan, they just, their defense is just something else in a different way. But I think it'll be a lot closer than people are expecting. It's going to be you're not going to see a blowout with these two teams. It's going to be a lot closer match.
I'm excited to see Bud Dupree, his first game in a Tennessee Titans uniform. I think we mentioned the offensive line is concerned. DJ Humphries at left tackle has been there for a while, but I think him against Bud Dupree is going to be that matchup or wherever Bud Dupree is lined up, if they're going to be able to contain him. I mean, we mentioned that. I mean, they lost some players on defense. Adoree Jackson, he didn't play much last year anyway. They lost Malcolm Butler to the Cardinals, who now we know what's going on with Butler. Tennessee is not the same defense they were a couple of years ago. So despite having Jayon Brown and those guys at that linebacking core, I mean, I just don't know if Tennessee's defense is going to be able to hold Arizona either, which is why I'm having a hard time picking this game. I know they're favored by 3 at home. I think that's the line, under 3 for Tennessee. So I'm going to go – this is tough. I'm going to take Tennessee by the skin of their teeth. I just think their offense right now is slightly better because of the options that they have. I think Brown, Jones, and Henry are an outstanding trio, and I think that's a slight upgrade over Hopkins, Green, and then Edmonds. So that's where I kind of stand with that. So I have the Titans inching them out in a close one, but the Cardinals, who knows? Maybe they turn around and they pull this one off. I think this game is on high upset watch for sure.
Yeah, I'd have to agree. I think Tennessee is going to edge them out. It's a close game. I think that's where it stands. Like Tennessee's kind of like to me, the Seattle of the AFC team that it's easy to forget about. You kind of discount them. Ryan Tannehill's kind of, whatever. And next thing you know, Ryan Tannehill's having an elite year. Tennessee's winning a lot of games, winning the division. They upset somebody in the playoffs. So I could see that being the case again for Tennessee this year. So I'm not surprised at all if they beat the Cardinals, whether it's close or not in this first game. I think they should beat the Cardinals, in all honesty.
James, are you 3-0 here on Tennessee, or because usually when that happens, the other team wins? So
yeah, I'm 3-0. It's early on.
The Cardinals are going to win then.
That's right.
Book it.
Arizona Cardinals, high upset alert, maybe 38-35 score.
That'd be nice.
Cardinals edge out the Titans. Imagine that. But Jordan, wanted to thank you a lot for hopping on tonight. Really appreciate your insight on anything. Is there anything else you wanted to add? If you want to plug your social media and all that stuff.
Yeah, I mean, you guys are doing great. Thanks for having me on. Twitter up here. I'm missing the underscore because they didn't have one. I got to draw one on this beautiful little thing I made. I'm going to show Spurgeon underscore. You can follow me there. That's where all my content is. And yeah, just eager for the NFL season to start. Got off to a hot start with high school football and college this weekend. And now the Sunday grind begins, starting on Thursday. Bucks and the Cowboys. Very excited for that game, by the way. I saw you guys had someone talking about the Bucks earlier. Very excited about Tom Brady and the Bucks. I think they're the team to beat this year. I think it's not close. I think they are in their own tier. So I'm excited to see what they do against the Cowboys in week 1 on Thursday night.
That's right. We have a Patriots fan talking about the Cardinals. So, but hey, look, I'm excited for that week 4 matchup as well. So that'll be a lot of fun up in Foxborough for sure. The tickets were insane for that game. Like the lowest ticket was like 900 something. So yeah, I don't know if that's where. I mean, who knows? We'll see. But I'm definitely picking Tampa Bay that week. But Jordan, anyway, thank you so much for hopping on the show. Really appreciate it. Best of luck to the Cardinals, to the Patriots this season. Until then, thank you so much. Have a good one, Jordan.
Yeah, thank you guys. Have a great night.